You have to beat all 8 enemies to stay safe. If you don't, your heart will stop beating. Right now, you haven't defeated any of them. The count is 0. The warning was super scary. If you don't get the job done, you'll die. Jin-Woo thought to himself. So, I have to defeat them, or I'll be the one who ends up dead. The message was shocking, but Jin-Woo didn't stay worried for long. He had a task to complete, and he knew what was at stake. His own life. Jin-Woo's fear quickly turned into relief. He couldn't believe his luck. It was really happening. One thing had been bothering him since he started getting messages and seeing his ability stats. What if this strange phenomenon just stopped? It had started out of nowhere, so it could end just as suddenly. Right? This thought had been making him anxious all the time. But now, with this urgent quest, things were starting to make more sense. This wasn't just a lucky break, or someone being kind. If it were, the goal would have been to get out of this sticky situation alive. Not to threaten Jin-Woo with death, if he failed. The system had its own plans, and they didn't involve making Jin-Woo stronger just for his own good. No, the system needed Jin-Woo to be strong for its own reasons. This quest made it clear when the time came, Jin-Woo would have to be willing to do whatever it took, even if that meant taking down other hunters without hesitation. The message was loud and clear. The system's goals were what mattered, not Jin-Woo's well-being. Jin-Woo felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank goodness. Everything was starting to make sense now. It wasn't just random luck that had been helping him out. There was a reason for everything. Every time he faced a tough spot, he wanted to come out stronger on the other side. He was tired of living on edge, never knowing what would happen next. It was like being stuck on a cliff with no safety net to catch him if he fell. But then something amazing happened. On the very day when things seemed most hopeless, an incredible opportunity came his way. Jin-Woo and the system were on the same page. They both wanted the same thing. It was a simple trade. The system would help him, and he'd use it to his advantage. That's all Jin-Woo needed to know. As long as the system had a goal, it wouldn't just vanish into thin air. Jin-Woo stood up, brushing himself off from the rubble. His health was pretty bad. 136 all 600. That one attack had taken almost half of his health. He wasn't surprised, though. A C-rank hunter's magic was strong. Jin-Woo knew he couldn't hold back anymore if he wanted to survive. Jin-Woo's eyes blazed with anger as he took a step closer to Dong-suk. The guys surrounding Jin-Ho, who was shaking like a leaf, suddenly noticed Jin-Woo and did a double take. What the, is he really alive? One of them asked, shocked. Another guy snickered. Ah, looks like Jin-Han's lost his edge. Someone else chuckled and said, yeah, and he's just an E-ranker. What a joke. Dong-suk rubbed his chin thoughtfully and said, Jin-Han, you should gone all out. Jin-Han's face turned bright red with embarrassment. I guess you're right, Dong-suk said. But Chu-Ha-Wan knew that wasn't true. He had definitely given it his all, using up a big chunk of his magic power. So how was Jin-Woo still standing? Had he missed the target? No way. The blast had been too loud for that. Chu-Ha-Wan's mind was filled with questions, but before he could ask any of them, Jin-Woo spoke up. Since you like to play with people's lives. The squad members' eyes were glued to him, waiting to see what would happen next. Jin-Woo suddenly stopped right in front of the group. Jin-Yo's eyes widened in surprise. But the other hunters just shrugged it off. Some of them even made fun of him, sneering at his nervous reaction. Jin-Woo kept talking in a flat tone. So, are you guys ready to face what happens next? Dong-suk burst out laughing. What is this guy even saying? One of the hunters, a guy with narrow eyes, stepped forward and wrapped his arm around Jin-Woo's neck. Don't worry, I'll take care of him, he said with a sneer. The guy's face changed as he tightened his arm muscles. He was trying to put Jin-Woo in a headlock, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't budge Jin-Woo's head. This didn't make sense. Wasn't Jin-Woo just a low-ranking E? The guy was getting frustrated, wondering why he couldn't move him. Suddenly, he realized something was off. What was going on here? Sweat beaded on the man's forehead as he stared at Jin-Woo in awe. How was he so strong? Suddenly, a swift motion and a faint shirsh sound filled the air. Junti's head dropped to the ground with a thud. Junti. His friends cried out, taking a step back. They were shocked and confused. How did he get a dagger? One of them asked. Where did it even come from? The group retreated, pulling out their own weapons as they went. Jin-Woo was now holding Kasaka's Venom Fang, a deadly dagger with blood dripping from its edge. It had appeared in his hand out of nowhere. A notification pinged in his ear. He still had 7 enemies to defeat. but he had already taken down one. 7 more to go. Jin-Woo scanned the group, his eyes locked onto each member like a hunter sizing up his next meal. Dong-suk swallowed hard, fear creeping into his voice. Dong-suk's eyes widened in shock as a dagger suddenly popped up in Jin-Woo's hand. But what really blew his mind was Jung-tae's sudden death. How did an E-rank hunter like Jin-Woo take down a stronger D-rank hunter? With just one hit. Dong-suk had no idea what kind of trick Jin-Woo used, but it was clear that things were about to get real. They needed to be super careful from now on. Dong-suk glanced over at the guy standing next to him. Jin-Woo Yuan. Give him another hit, he said quietly. Jin-Woo Yuan nodded slightly, understanding exactly what Dong-suk meant. Jushowan was more determined than ever. He wouldn't fail this time. His fingers started glowing with a bright light, ready to shoot arrows of pure energy. But just as he was about to attack, Jin-Woo suddenly appeared in front of him. Jushowan's jaw dropped in shock. He stuttered. Jin-Woo gave him a fierce glare. The plan was simple. Take down the mage hunter with powerful blasts. Even though he had weak defenses, Jin-Woo had already thought it all through in his head, and was ready to act. Ji-Yuhan's eyes widened in shock as the blade sliced into his neck. "Ack!" he screamed, clutching at the gaping wound. He crumpled to the ground with a loud thud. The hunters didn't hesitate. Their leader yelled, "Kill him," and they all pounced on Jin-Woo at once. But Jin-Woo was ready. He tuned into his surroundings, focusing on every move his enemies made. Suddenly, everything else faded into the background, and time seemed to slow down. With his super-sharp reflexes kicking in, Jin-Woo dodged and weaved with ease. His agility was off the charts, and he was using it to stay one step ahead of the hunters. Jin-Woo dodged and blocked a crazy number of attacks from swords, spears and arrows that came flying at him from all sides. The hunters' eyes went wide with shock and amazement. How is this possible? They wondered. He's moving so fast. I'll never hit him. Their faces turned pale as they struggled to keep up. To them, Jin-Woo was a blur too quick to catch. He danced around the hunters, striking their weak spots one by one. Suddenly weird messages popped up. Paralysis activated. Drain activated. And paralysis activated. Again, the special powers of Jin-Woo's dagger, Kasaka's venom fang, threw the hunters into total chaos. One hunter screamed, I'm frozen. Another shouted. Is this some kind of magic? Is this magic? Someone shouted. But before they could say another word, a hunter cursed loudly. You son of a bitch. Suddenly 3 strange messages appeared. Debuff. Paralysis has been activated. Debuff. Drain has been activated. And again, debuff. Paralysis has been activated. The hunters were in trouble. Arg. One of them yelled in pain. Another stumbled over his words. Who the are you? A third just let out a loud waza. Chaos erupted as screams came from every direction. The 5 hunters surrounding Jin-Woo didn't stand a chance. They hit the ground one by one. Thud. Thud. Pun. In no time at all, 7 enemies were defeated. But only one was supposed to be left to fight. The scoreboard flashed, number of enemies to defeat, 7. Jin-Woo turned to face the last hunter still standing, ready for what came next. Dong-suk, a giant of a man with a wild beard, slammed his shield to the ground. His face twisted in a fierce scowl. He let out a mighty roar. Gritto. With a burst of speed, he charged at Jin-Woo. His footsteps pounded the ground. Talk, 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 talk. As Dong-suk ran, he sized up the situation. He was like a tank, strong and tough, with a high Se rank to prove it. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo was probably a damage dealer, someone who could dish out serious pain. Jin-Woo was super fast, but he probably couldn't beat Dong-suk's special skill, reinforcement. There's no way a dagger could deliver a critical hit. When they clashed, Jin-Woo would likely be the one to fall. As they got closer, Dong-suk turned his body so his shoulder would hit Jin-Woo first. Reinforcement, he shouted. But in an instant, everything spun out of control, and Dong-suk found himself staring up at the dungeon ceiling. He landed with a thud, his head ringing and his neck and back slamming into the ground. Dong-suk tried to stand up, but his body wouldn't budge. No matter how hard he strained, he was stuck lying there. Suddenly he let out a weird cough, and blood splattered out of his mouth. Dong-suk's mind was racing. Had that boy really thrown him? Could it be true that he, Dong-suk Cobb, had lost a fight based on pure strength? Jin-Woo had just defeated 5 C-rank and 3 D-rank hunters in the blink of an eye. This was crazy. There was no way he could be an E-ranker. Something wasn't adding up. Jin-Woo stood tall over Dong-suk, a super experienced hunter who couldn't even control his own body right now. It was clear who had won this fight. How could someone with skills like Jin-Woo's be ranked so low? Jin-Woo and Dong-suk were fighting, but this wasn't just a friendly match. Jin-Woo had no plans to let Dong-suk get away that easily. Dong-suk raised his hands, pleading for mercy. Wait, please, spare my life, he begged. I'll give you all the money you want. Just don't hurt me. But Jin-Woo was unforgiving. You're asking me to spare your life after trying to kill me 3 times, he said, his voice icy cold. He reminded Dong-suk of their past encounters. The first time Dong-suk had tried to kill him was when he blocked the entrance to the boss's lair. There were 3 times when Dong-suk tried to get Jin-Woo killed. First he told Jin-Ho to do the job. Then he ordered Ji-eun to shoot him. Each time, it was Dong-suk who wanted Jin-Woo dead. And that's not even counting what happened in this battle. Jin-Woo had had enough. After surviving the underground temple, he decided to fight back just as hard as he was fought. It was time for payback. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. If Dong-suk wanted to play it rough, Jin-Woo was ready to play along. Dong-suk was furious. He had been trying to beg his way out of trouble, but it wasn't working. As he realized he wasn't going to get his way, he started to get really angry. His face turned red, and he began to foam at the mouth. Do you think you can get away with this? He shouted. Do you know who my little brother is? But before he could say another word, everything went black. There was a loud cracking sound, and Dong-suk's neck was broken. He let out a weird gurgling noise. Kak, and his eyes rolled back in his head. Suddenly a message appeared. Number of enemies to defeat. There's on number of enemies defeated. 8. The quest was finally over. Jin-Woo let out a deep sigh, and pulled his hands away from Dong-suk's head. He looked down at his hands, feeling a mix of emotions. Woo, he breathed, relieved that it was all over. Jin-Woo had just been in a fight where he took down 8 people. You'd think he'd be pretty shaken up, but his hands were steady as can be. That seemed weird. Even to him. He wondered if this was normal. Jin-Woo put his hand on his chest to check his heartbeat. It was beating steadily. Bob, 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 bump, like nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. This made him think about something for the first time. Maybe being able to see the system wasn't the only thing that had changed about him since he left the underground temple. Jin-Woo's thoughts were suddenly cut off by a familiar sound. Ping! A notification popped up, grabbing his attention. It said he had completed the urgent quest to defeat the enemies, and that his rewards were waiting. The message asked if he wanted to check them out. Jin-Woo wasn't surprised. He knew there would be rewards. He quickly typed check. Another ping sounded, and a new message appeared. You have the following rewards. Jin-Woo's eyes scanned the list of goodies. Reward 1 was first up, and he was curious to see what it was. Jin-Woo's eyes nearly popped out when he saw the amazing rewards. He got 10 ability points, which was always a good thing. But what really caught his attention was the new skill called Murderous Intent. This skill sounded awesome. Jin-Woo thought back to his battle with the giant spider. If he hadn't used his dash skill, things might have ended badly. Luckily dash had helped him defeat the boss. Now he couldn't wait to see what Murderous Intent could do. Skills can totally flip the script in a battle. That's why runestones, which teach hunters new skills, are super pricey. Jin-Woo was curious about one skill in particular, so he decided to check it out. Skill, Murderous Intent. He got his reward, and ping. Here's what he found out. Skill, Murderous Intent. He got his reward, and ping. Get ready to take down your targets. You can pick multiple ones at the same time. The panic debuff is super powerful. It slashes all of your opponent's abilities by a whopping 50%. This is a big deal, because most skills can't weaken every single one of an enemy's abilities, even if it's just for a little while. Like other debuffs, it might not work on someone who's really good at resisting them, but for most enemies, Jin-Woo will have the upper hand when he activates this skill. This thing was huge because it could affect lots of people at the same time. That meant there were endless ways to use it, which is pretty cool. The potential rewards were enormous, but so were the risks. Wait a minute. Now that I think about it, the rewards aren't that amazing after all. The penalty was serious. It had even put his life in danger. Jin-Woo looked around, frowning at the terrible scene. He had seen a lot of deaths as a hunter, but it still bothered him to see dead bodies everywhere. This was what the quest had asked for, but he didn't think the rewards were worth all the lives lost. He probably would have fought Dong-suk's crew anyway, even without the quest. Some people just can't get enough. no matter what they have. Jin-Woo shook his head, feeling frustrated. Just then the cave started shaking again. And this time it was even worse. The ground rumbled loudly, making everything tremble. Ryu Amble. It was time to leave the dungeon, but Jin-Woo had a few things to wrap up first. One of those things was dealing with Jinhyo. Jin-Woo's eyes locked onto him, and Jinhyo quickly looked away. Startled, Jin-Woo felt a pang of sympathy for the newbie hunter. He wondered what he should do with Jinhyo. One thing was for sure, Jin-Woo didn't want to hurt him. Jin-Woo didn't want anyone to know what had just happened. If people found out, it would be a big problem for him. He thought he should at least tell the others to keep quiet. But before he could say anything, Jinhyo suddenly dropped to his knees and bowed his head. "Please spare my life, boss," he begged. Jin-Woo was surprised. He had a feeling that dealing with Jinhyo would be easier than he thought. Jinhyo was shaking like crazy. Jin-Woo's face was super pale, and it wasn't hard to guess why. He had just seen 8 people get killed right in front of him. It was a pretty shocking thing to witness. Fear is a powerful tool that can control people, and Jin-Woo decided to use a bit of it to his advantage. "Why should I spare you?" he asked, his voice firm. Jin-Woo's heart practically stopped at the question. You could almost hear his fear. Jin-Woo wondered for a split second if he had been too harsh, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. Jin-Woo stuttered out a response. "If you need money, I'll tell my father." But before he could finish, Jin-Woo cut him off. "Is that how you see me?" Jin-Woo scowled, his expression angry. He had been poor his whole life, but he would never stoop to holding someone hostage for cash. The idea was disgusting to him. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed at Jinhyo's apology. "I'm so sorry," Jinhyo stuttered. Jin-Woo was tempted to smack him on the back of the head, but he held back. Jinhyo looked like he was about to freak out, and Jin-Woo didn't want to scare him even more. Jinhyo swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on Jin-Woo's tough expression. Earlier Dong-suk had offered Jinhyo money, which made Jin-Woo wonder what had changed. Had Jinhyo really given up on wealth and chosen a life of fighting and danger instead? As Jinhyo looked at Jin-Woo, he couldn't help but think that his idea of him was all wrong. It was too early to jump to conclusions, but one thing didn't add up. Why had the guy packed so many essence stones? Jin-Woo had thoroughly searched the spider's stomach for these stones earlier. Essence stones were like super powerful energy sources, and key ingredients for making magic tools. For hunters, they were basically money. Jin-Woo's mind started racing. Suddenly it clicked, those essence stones were like dirty money, earned at a terrible cost. Imagine being a warrior with no problem getting what you want, even if it's from a spider's stomach. That's because the special stones he found were his reward for fighting hard and winning. This guy doesn't mess around. If you're his enemy, you're in trouble. But if he beats you, he won't take anything he didn't earn. Someone tried to pay him to go easy, but that just made him angry. Jin-Woo, the warrior, didn't want any freebies from his dad's wallet. He wanted something he felt he deserved for letting someone live. It was all about earning it fair and square. Jin-Woo still looked pretty grumpy, and Jinhyo couldn't help but sneak a peek at his face. In a flash, Jinhyo came up with a desperate plan, and blurted out, "Boss, I'll give you all the treasure from this dungeon, if you let me live." Jin-Woo's expression changed to surprise, and he said, just as Jinhyo had hoped. His offer caught Jin-Woo's attention. Jinhyo kept talking, trying to convince him. "Think about it, boss. If you're the only one who makes it out of here alive, and you get all the rewards, people are going to get suspicious. It's just not a good idea." Jinhyo was positive that Jin-Woo wasn't what he seemed. He was a fake, pretending to be something he's not. Things just got worse. He was sure Jin-Woo was a top-notch fake hero who actually liked killing people. That meant Jin-Woo probably cared what others thought of him. "So," he said, "but here's the thing. If we both make it out of here alive, I get all the essence stones from this dungeon. It's right there in our contract, and no one would ever think you're responsible for taking out the rest of our team, because you didn't stand to gain anything from those stones. Of course nobody would suspect Jin-Woo either." Jin-Woo was the son of a big shot. His dad ran a huge construction company. The money they'd get from selling the essence stones would be nothing to him. Jin-Woo looked at Jin-Woo and said, "The money is all yours, boss. You took down Dong-suk's squad, and saved me, so it's only fair that you keep it." He really stressed the word fair, and honestly Jin-Woo was right. What he was suggesting was the easiest way for Jin-Woo to get his hands on those essence stones. Dong-suk was gone, and no one else had a claim to the essence stones. Not even Dong-suk could take them with him to the afterlife. Now, only one person had the right to these powerful stones. But Jin-Woo was happy to hand them over to Jin-Woo. He didn't want to force Jin-Woo to give up the stones, but he thought, why look a gift horse in the mouth? After all, if it wasn't for Jin-Woo, Jin-Woo would probably be dead or held captive right now. So it made sense that the stones should belong to Jin-Woo. As Jin-Woo's face relaxed, Jin-Woo knew he had made the right decision. He was sure Jin-Woo wouldn't say no to the essence stones, especially since they were a kind of reward for dealing with Dong-suk and his men. The thing is, when Jin-Woo and Jin-Woo said rightfully, they didn't exactly mean the same thing, but neither of them realized that. Fine. Jin-Woo agreed, and Jin-Woo's face lit up with excitement. He was starting to think Jin-Woo was pretty cool because he stood up for what he believed in, but then Jin-Woo's face went blank again. How can I trust you? He asked. Jin-Woo was thinking about the real reason he was doing this. He wasn't in it just for the 2000,001, and he definitely wasn't gonna let fear control him. Jin-Woo was being careful, not wanting any problems to come up later. How could I ever betray you? He asked. You've saved my life more than once. The other person looked at him and said, but you could still break your promise and tell everyone what happened here, right? Jin-Woo didn't think it would be a big deal, even if the person did talk. After all, he had only fought back in self-defense. When Dong-suk's squad attacked him, they had all been armed and ready to fight, and they had cast a powerful magic spell at him first. The law was now on Jin-Woo's side, thanks to the rise of hunters. This meant he would definitely be found not guilty. But Jin-Woo didn't want any drama or trouble. He wanted this whole thing to disappear quietly. To make that happen, he needed Jin-Hyo to cooperate fully. Jin-Woo's way of getting Jin-Hyo on board might not have been perfect, but it got the job done. Well, Jin-Woo gave Jin-Hyo a tough stare, expecting an answer. Jin-Hyo was determined to see this through. I'd never do something as cowardly as that, especially to someone who saved my life. But then I saw the look in Jin-Hyo's eyes, and it seemed really familiar. It was the same look he had when he refused to help Dong-suk and his crew. That's when it hit me. This guy is actually telling the truth. I remembered how Jin-Hyo had chosen to trust me, in a situation where our lives were on the line. He had gone against 8 other hunters. Just because he believed in me, it was like a give-and-take thing. He had put his faith in me, and now I realized that I could trust him too. Jin-Woo decided to give Jin-Hyo a chance, but not before teaching him a lesson. He picked up the shield that Dong-suk had thrown away and said, my back still hurts from where Dong-suk stabbed me. Jin-Woo examined the shield carefully, then threw it at the wall with all his might. The shield crashed into the wall with a loud bam. It got stuck, with more than half of it lodged deep into the wall. Jin-Hyo's face turned pale and sweaty, and he gulped hard. My little brother won't let me down, right? He asked nervously. His assistant stuttered. Of course not, boss. Just then the dungeon shook violently again. RR rumble. Time was running out. Jin-Woo had never planned to hurt Jin-Hyo, so he thought that was enough reassurance. He barked out an order. Gather up all the essence stones. Now. Time to leave the dungeon, someone said. Jin-Hyo jumped up and bowed deeply, his smile back on his face. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo started searching Dong-suk's pockets. Jin-Hyo grabbed his bag, remembering that he needed to get paid. His daily fee was 2,000 and he wanted every single penny. He checked Dong-suk's wallet and found a bunch of 50,000 bills, a few dozen of them.